Ironhide and Ratchet are both iconic Transformers characters, and though both sharing the same body type, couldn't be more different from one another. Ratchet is the Autobot medic, renowned for his unmatchable medical skills and his tendency to be a complete badass in certain situations. Ironhide is the old and hardened Autobot who is more than eager to head into battle so long as it means he can punch something. Both are extremely popular characters and have been on the Autobot front lines for decades, and as such have been killed many times throughout the many different continuities of Transformers, which is what we're going to be looking at in this video. First, we begin with Ironhide. Of course, Ironhide's first and most memorable death occurred in Transformers the movie in 1986, which saw him on board an Autobot shuttle that was boarded by the Decepticons. And of course, we all know how that ends. Ironhide didn't give up even when he was shot through the chest, and continued to try and stop Megatron even though he could do nothing but crawl. Of course, his heroic nonsense was rewarded in kind. This moment was significant enough to have multiple aftermaths as per the different continuities. In the Deviations comic and the Marvel comic adaptation of the 1986 movie, Ironhide meets his end once again, but as he dies in the same way, and these are retellings of the same continuity, they will not be included. In the Headmasters cartoon, Ironhide made a cameo appearance alive and well despite his very violent death, though this is more likely just an animation error. In the Timelines comic Descent into Evil, Ironhide survived this incident after Optimus granted him a new body via the reconfiguration matrix. In the Generation 2 comic, Ironhide was part of an Autobot squadron deployed on Ethos to fight against the Cybertronians, though took several shots through the chest during the battle. Though he was never explicitly seen dying, he was never seen again. It's hard to tell whether this was the end of Ironhide, but as it's never seen, I cannot count it. In Transformers Energon, Ironhide was dead inside. In the Movieverse continuity, Ironhide had a pretty rough time. Of course, in Dark of the Moon, Ironhide meets his ends at the hands of the traitorous Sentinel Prime, who opens fire on him with his rust cannon and watches Ironhide basically crumble to pieces. Sheesh. This wasn't Ironhide's only death within the universe of Michael Bay, however, as the Movieverse games just loved killing Ironhide. In the Decepticon campaign of Transformers the game, Ironhide was felled by Blackout after attempting to take him on. In Transformers the game Decepticons DS, Ironhide came up against Brawl, his rival, and though Ironhide would totally kick his ass in a normal fight, this game isn't called Decepticons for no reason, and Ironhide was promptly killed. Dreamwave's 2004 G.I. Joe The Transformers comic killed off everyone at the end of the series, presumably including Ironhide. However, their unreleased sequel to the story saw Ironhide appearing on one of the covers, meaning somehow he survived. The IDW Generation 1 continuity saw Ironhide as a prominent character, though when they decided to screw up their comic series in 2009 with their horrible ongoing series, the first issue saw Ironhide shot through the chest, and Roddy's to blame, this comic sucks. Bad name. Of course, he was revived by Alpha Trion later on, and is now currently active in the comic. In the Shattered Glass comics, despite the universe being completely opposite to everything we know, Ironhide is still Optimus' closest advisor. He's just evil now. This was exactly why he was among those Ultra Magnets chose to slaughter when he invaded an Autobot base, as he knew it would piss off Optimus. And it did. Moving on to Ratchet now, while this Autobot may just be the medic of the team, he has seen more than his fair share of action throughout his many appearances. We begin, of course, in Generation 1, where Ratchet was not only killed in the 1986 movie on board the exact same ship as Ironhide, but also in the Generation 1 comic, as he managed to sacrifice himself to stop Megatron after he was captured and forced to work for the Decepticon, and the two were seemingly killed in an explosion. Except they weren't, and both the reader and the Autobots wish they had been, because Ratchet and Megatron returned, having apparently been fused together in the warp portal Megatron had on board the Ark as an escape route. After some life-scarring issues containing the Ratchet-Megatron hybrid, Fix-It eventually managed to separate the two. This, however, was not enough for Ratchet, as he later wound up being on the Ark once again with Shockwave, Galvatron and Starscream also on board. In a moment of self-sacrifice and heroism, after beating the crap out of Starscream, Ratchet crashed the Ark on Earth, sacrificing himself but ridding the universe of the Decepticon threat once and for all. Well, except for Galvatron, who woke up the next issue, and Megatron, who later made it out, and Starscream, who would later be revived. This ending once again would have multiple outcomes depending on the continuity. In the Classics continuity, Ratchet was kept aboard the Ark as Megatron rose to power once again, though Ratchet was unable to do anything about it as he found himself unable to move. He was left to die by the Decepticons, but eventually was found and rescued by the Autobots. In a not-so-happy ending, the Regeneration 1 comics saw Ratchet being kept alive as a head by Megatron, and when the Autobots came down to Earth to take Megatron down once and for all, they found what remained of their old friend. Unfortunately, there was nothing left to save, and Kup was forced to kill Ratchet in order to weaken Megatron enough for him to be put down for good. Poor Ratchet. Ratchet was also present in the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover, and so of course was killed at the end of the comic, though he wasn't lucky enough to appear in the sequel like his comrade Ironhide. Much like his Autobot comrades who were also unlucky enough to appear in the movies, Ratchet was an prominent character in the Michael Bay movies, appearing in all 4 of them. However, in Age of Extinction, Ratchet was one of the many Autobots who were hunted down and killed by the anti-Transformer organization Cemetery Wind, who hunted him down until Lockdown could snuff him out, before tearing his spark out without any remorse. Let's be honest, this is probably the most amount of screen time Ratchet has had in the 4 movies. In the universal stream of Primax 185.0 Beta, Galvatron terrorized the galaxy with his Zod army, and planned to form Grand Galvatron by transferring his spark into Cybertron in order to combat the Quintesson army that threatened him. He was stopped by Ratchet and the Dreadnoks as they managed to destroy his spark during the transferal process, but they sacrificed themselves in the process to stop Galvatron once and for all. In Beast Wars Uprising, the story takes place long after Ratchet and Ironhide have passed, but the two were very well-known builders of Cybertron. Finally, we look at my most hated continuity to visit, the Find Your Fate Generation 1 books, which contain multiple and confusing outcomes in the various choices that involve Autobots getting killed. In the book Autobot Alert, Grapple attempts to lift a sunken ship using his crane to retrieve a sphere, but his crane suffers damage in the process. Ratchet manages to fix it, but in the meantime the Decepticons show up and start shooting everybody, and despite the best efforts of Brawn and Ironhide defending the ship, the Decepticons destroy it, and shortly after all of the Autobots. In Invisibility Factor, 2 outcomes saw the death of Ratchet. In one, the Decepticons managed to get a hold of the invisibility device and use it to sneak into Metroplex City undetected and reduce the Autobots to scrap metal. The other outcome involved the Decepticons laying waste to Metroplex using neuron beams, which killed all of the Autobots within the Titan, including Ratchet. Finally, Decepticon Poison has an outcome that saw Ironhide, Ratchet, and the rest of the Autobots completely outmatched against the Decepticons and all wiped out. With that, we now head to the leaderboard. Surprisingly, the reckless Ironhide loses out to Ratchet's 11, though the two of them both sit nicely above our previous contenders. Now, who's next? Thanks for watching. Got through the heart, and you're to blame. You give love a bad name. I can't sing. I have no friends, I'm gonna cry. Bad night.